Thank you so much, Gina, and thank you for your leadership to our program in the sub-Saharan Africa. And good afternoon to you in Mozambique, and of course, good morning to those who are here in this part of the world. I am, dialing in from Washington area, which is 7 a.m. And I'm pretty sure that there are some people also joining us from around the world, and good evening to you as well. Really very excited to be with you this morning, and really on behalf of the Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers, we just want to express our pleasure and delight to welcome you all to this dissemination event of our several new research materials that developed under the project toward an inclusive and peaceful society in Mozambique. As my colleague Gina saying earlier, we lovely call the project TIPS. So we continue using TIPS throughout this event this morning. So as many of you know, this project is supported by the European Union, and this is clearly demonstrates the commitment of the European Union in bolstering engagement with civil society organizations in conflict prevention and peace building. We're delighted to be joined today also here, and you will hear from him later, and I will introduce him after I conclude my remark, by Mr. Ignacio Barral, who is the head of the cooperation at the European delegation in Nairobi. So Mr. Barral, to you and on behalf of all the TIPS projects partners here, we send our sincere cooperation and appreciation for you and to your team for the unwavering commitment to advancing this partnership, and particularly through this project in mitigating natural resources conflict throughout the region in Mozambique and beyond. So whether it is really due to the scarcity of resources, supply control, power dynamic, or profiteering natural resources increasingly subjected to intense community-based natural resources conflicts that are embedded with complex and unannounced, driving factors and challenges. So in recognition of the recognizing this conflict will not be solved through one group alone. We all recognize and know that. So this particular project, the TIPS project, built upon Sustainable Development Goal number 17, which is clearly focusing on peace, justice, and strong institutions. As well as this is also clearly combined with the Sustainable Development Goal 17, which is really focusing on partnership for the goals, as well as the policies, programs, and best practices of the European Union and regional entities to ensure we support the knowledge buildings, skills and capacity and of civil society to meaningfully contribute to peace building and conflict resolution. So this multi-level collaboration and coordination that we have here and the establishment of sustainable platforms for multi-stakeholders dialogue and collaboration for us, are very foundational elements in which drives this particular projects. So this include the strong engagement of local actors, including religious and traditional actors, women and youth, and government officials in all programming initiatives. The sustainability of the TIPS project and its outcomes are imperative to ensure we continue to foster inclusive peace throughout the country and region. The challenges that in Mozambique and Mozambique faces today regarding natural resources management and it is related conflicts are not unique to Mozambique. Therefore, the TIPS project and it is related research can be a model for regional and inclusive programming and advocacy across the country and within the region. So we will see the sustainability of the project ensured through building the local leadership, capacity and skills, and by utilizing creative and cost-effective ways to sustain established inclusive structures, such as online platforms and resources and resource bases. So the initiative also supports strong coordination mechanisms between the European Union, the project partners, and its beneficiaries. So this really partnership and collaboration is really very strong, and we depend on that. So the demand for resources is likely to continue to grow in the coming decades. Intensified resources stress will only lead to a new or exacerbated conflicts, leading to uncertainties to international relations in an already turbulent world. It is through this project, such as TIPS, and the collaboration between multilateral institutions, such as the European Union and civil society, we will be able to mitigate the consequences. We will be able to mitigate the consequential dangers of resource management and identify sustainable solutions to equitable resources, access, and consumption. So without any further ado, and with this, short opening words, it is my pleasure to welcome to the floor Mr. Ignacio Paral, who is the head of the cooperation at the European Union delegation in Nairobi, to offer the welcome remarks prior to be hearing more from our project partners and lead researchers. So Mr. Baral, thank you again for joining us, and thank you for your support and commitment to these very critical projects. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I want to check first if you are listening to me properly.
Yes, I can hear you clearly here in Washington. So let's hope it's the same situation to our colleagues from around the world.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you, Gina. Dear colleagues from Finchurch Aid and Peacemakers Network, and colleagues from the civil society and academia and other partner organizations that are participating in today's presentation. I would like to start by thanking Finchurch Aid and the Peacemakers Network for organizing the presentation of this important report entitled Great Wealth, Few Beneficiaries: Local Perceptions of Natural Resources Management in Mozambique, and 3 of its policy briefs linked to artisanal gold mine, decent resettlements, and restricted access. The report is a product of a research that was conducted in 27 districts in Sofala, Inhambane, Tete, Cabo Delgado, and Niassa. It is an integral part of the project towards an inclusive and peaceful society, which you refer, Mohammed, as TIPS. This project has been financed by the European Union's Instrument for Peace and Stability and implemented as I said earlier, by a consortium of partners made of Finchurch Aid, Peacemakers Network, Instituto de Estudos Sociais e Económicos, Multi-Party Democracy Institute, and Council of Religions, all of whom I believe, will be participating here today. I'm actually glad to be here today because, I would like to hear about, the key findings of the research report that I believe is filling an important knowledgement gap in assessing the impact that activities, which range from mega extractive projects, to smaller artisanal mining, have on the lives of local communities. We're also looking forward to hear on some reflections from the local launches of the report and the policy briefs that took place in Maputo, Niassa, and Sofala. Let me give you a quick overview of why the European Union is supporting this project. We have witnessed the negative impact that projects related to the natural resources extraction can have on the communities in many contexts, including in sub-Saharan Africa, not only, but including the subcontinent. When these projects do not engage with local populations effectively, then there is a significant risk of conflict between the communities and the private sector. And it is without a transparent accountability mechanisms that further risks of disappointment and discontent may rise within the local communities. These are just, some risks that can be a consequence of unregulated policies. However, we have also seen that when key stakeholders, such as the companies, the communities, the local authorities, security states like the police, when they come together to find win-win solutions, then many conflict issues related to natural resources can be resolved through peaceful means. And this is why the EU, together with the government of Mozambique, supports various international conventions such as the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, EITI. But this alone, is not enough, to prevent disputes that easily turn into wider conflicts. Strong social collaboration between communities and with state institutions as well is actually needed. It is precisely in this sense that the European Union supports this project towards an inclusive and peaceful society, the TIPS. On the one hand, it is necessary to strengthen civil society initiatives that seek to address the dynamics of conflict over land and access to natural resources, whilst on the other hand, it is necessary to involve the authorities and other relevant actors, such as the private sector, to improve the governance and management of land and natural resources, and thus preventing the escalation of tensions and further conflict. In other words, everyone needs to have a better understanding of public policies and the impact they have on communities. They also, people need to know about collaboration between the state, the private sector, and the citizenry that is efficient and respectful of human rights. And that this is also necessary to increase general knowledge, which will finally translate into a fairer and more transparent distribution of resources. The European Union wants to make a key strategic contribution to Mozambique's post-COVID recovery by encouraging the country to examine the potential of a truly sustainable development model based on the principles of an ecological pact. As such, the future of the EU's program for the period 2021-2027 has put green growth at the top of the priority list. We will therefore continue as European Union to invest on the issues of sustainable and transparent management of natural resources and support for civil society organizations as well, believing that it is possible to implement development models that leave no one behind. So I would like to conclude, Mohammed, if you allow me, by thanking, the researchers and authors of the report, which I believe, provides, an excellent basis to continue discussing the important issues that have raised in the report. So I thank you very much. And I wish you all, a fruitful deliberations and conclusions. Over to you, Mohammed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Baral, and thank you for your words, and really appreciate the commitments and the way that you are looking into how this researches and the engagement actually of the civil society in close collaboration with government and with the EU in addressing this, resource conflicts in the region, in Mozambique and the region. So we really appreciate that. And I also join you to thank the researcher as well. So thank you so much. And now back to our manager, Gina.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ignacio, and thank you, Mohammed, also for your welcoming and opening remarks. Before we hear from the researchers, we will just briefly provide an overview of the project for those who might not be so familiar with the project. So just a short overview of the TIPS project. So I invite my colleague, Lacerda Nipang, who is the project coordinator for the project, to present to us the overview.
So this is, as all mentioned, towards an peaceful society project in Mozambique, which we call TIPS, and also from the EU. My presentation will just target 4 main points to make it more brief. It's about the project, objectives, output, and deliverable at the same time, and also the target group, which for instance are involved in the project as well. Okay, in terms of the project, as also Mohammed was mentioned, that this project really is targeting SDG 16 and it targets 6.1 and 6.7. And also the period of implementation is for 3 years, from 2021 to 2023. The amount is around 1.1 million from the EU. And the geographical coverage of the project is the 5 provinces that we're implementing, which were Nyamban in the southern region of the country, but also Sofala in the central part in Tet, we have Cabo Delgado, and also we have NIAS. When we look for the internal government instruments, this project as well is also complementing. This project is also complementing the 5 years annual plan of the Mozambican government, 2020 and 2024. As the main part of the project was the Institute of Economic Studies, and we have also Multi-Part Democracy Institute as well. And we have associated within the project, which is the Council of Religions in Mozambique, and also we have associated with the UK-based organization. Yes, Sarah? Next slide, sir. Yes, in terms of the objective, you can see the main one is contribute to conflict prevention, crisis preparedness and response, and peaceful through inclusive governance and management of the natural resource in Mozambique. With the specific objective, which is mainly in terms of strengthening the leadership and the capacity of civil society actors to prevent and address natural resource-based conflict through dialogue and the multi-stakeholder engagement with part of them. So we'll see how, for instance, in the next slide, how these objectives are operationalized in the implementation. With the 4 main outputs which are expected to do the project, the first one is about the conflict systems participatory research, which, for instance, this work as a baseline for our work for the project, where, for instance, was led by ES as our partner, which will be presented today, the findings. And then in terms of what we expected in terms of delivery of this first output was, for instance, the research report and the policy briefs, which were also shared within our links, the training guide and the manual, to which we use it to train our benefits of the project, and also actually we're doing the dissemination event after we did the validation of the key findings we find at the different area. So as you can see in the picture, the first picture there in the top is also show how, for instance, the team of the project did the research in terms of consulting different actors dealing with natural resource aspects within the all 5 provinces. And also we have the second one there, which is their old materials, the research materials which were developed starting from the research, the policy brief, which was we are showing that side as a result of the project actual. And then the other picture which we showed, that's the conference, which for instance, we started in terms of the sharing, the disseminating the results, the result which is coming from the project that we had. So this lecture, for instance, we are actually targeting output 1, which was expected within the project. Thank you, Sarah. Next one. The second output, which is a capacity building for target CSO and the community leaders on natural resource conflict. So for this one, as you can see, the 2 pictures. The first picture was the training which we conducted, targeting the different actors, but yes, specifically it's youth people, which wasn't engaged in terms of conflict and conflict-sensitive issues. Also, person they can take in terms of the Down there also you can see the community leaders and some women, which also they are one of our targeting in terms of our training, so that they really, as they know the problems happening in the ground, so there were many relevant actors during our training. So within the output 2, as I mentioned, we expected really to have a community leader selected in the training, which what was done, so that they received this training, and then also conduct the training session, and also we expected and really the training which were conducted of those community leaders and the community in general in CSO should be increase the capability and increase and play the mediation role within the local level. Yes, Sarah. The third output which was expected is about networking and collaboration action between CSO and the other development actors within the natural resource management conflict prevention. So we expect to establish the national forum with the 5 local chapters, which we've already done, and that helped us to support the implemented project. We create the national forum. The national forum will be a congregation of all actors working from the local level until national level, so there can be a space where all the civil society, traditional leaders, also CSO and other actors which can meet to discuss and create an agenda to influence the conflict resolution linked to the natural resource management. And as you can see from the picture process in that side, where the first picture represents the team of the Finnish Church Aid Network, they had a meeting with the religious actors, because as you know, the issue of conflict in many countries is more linked to the religious actor because of their faith and also their capability to lead this process. So one of the meeting which persons were work with them in terms of coordination. The two pictures above is linked for the a meeting. For instance, we use it to different actors with different with EU represented, also different religious leaders. But for instance, we support them. We're looking about the peace day in Mozambique. So for instance, they can play and support the role within the country. So it was an international level meeting, which for instance, our partners within the project brought the issue as well to this meeting at national level and the space of dialogue. Yes, sir. The fourth output, which is evidence-based advocacy, as you can see, we expect the multi-stakeholder dialogue meetings organized. So this is supposed to start at community level. So the first picture there is the community where they're discussing, for instance, the issue about conflict resolution linked to natural resource. And this serves as a base for the discussion that we're having at national level and also provincial level. And when we sit down there was one of the multi-stakeholder meeting forum, which for instance was held to discuss the issue of the conflict, natural resource, and other aspect, which for instance also is feeding up the output which was expected. So we call it this multi-dialogue discussion because we have different people participating in it, religious actors, civil society organization, community leaders, and so on. So just to share the questions, this is the stage where we are now in terms of the project. Next slide, please. So in general, in terms of target group that questions were expected, we expected civil society, community leaders, at least 30% of women and 50% youth, including religious and traditional art, are engaged in the project. And as you can see, for instance, the first picture there was one of the meeting which was held by our partners. The current is religious art is the Council of Religion, which, for instance, had the meeting in Cabo Delgado in the ADP areas, where, for instance, given the conflict in Cabo Delgado, they sat and discussed with those religious leaders to discuss about, for instance, how the project and other actors can support them given the issue where in Cabo Delgado, and also how this is also linked in terms of the natural resource exploitation of the conflict in that sense. When we go down there, for instance, we also find the meeting which was held, we found youth, women, so that was led by our partners, yes, person gathering information, also knowing about them. Some of them, they're exploring natural resources in traditional manner, so we heard about them, hopefully they can be involved in the project. And the one photo down there, it shows, for instance, how the different actors within the project, the consortium partner, they met also with local government authorities so that we can address the issue which you are finding within the community level, and also how, for instance, we can handle them, the role to support the facilitation process. Because when we look for the issue of the natural resource conflict, it's not only the role of civil society only, but also with the local authority and having their role on that. So in additional, for instance, at the national provincial level, with the district authority and provincial authority, and also working on the natural resource, but with member of parliament as well, and also member of parliamentary provisional level, and also other actors to deal in this area and supporting the implementation project also as our target group. So thank you. I think this was what I had to share within the project in terms of the big overview so that we can stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lacerda, for that overview of the project. Now we will go to the researchers for the project to share with us the key findings. So I would like to invite Yanni Rantala, who was the lead researcher on the project, as well as his colleague Sergio Shishava, who is the director of IESC. So over to you, Yanni.
Okay, so my name is Janne Rantala, a research affiliate in IESE and the principal author of TIPS research publications, currently working in the University College Cork. Thank you for an invitation and for everyone who is present here. In the following minutes, I will give an overview of the research report, which aims to synthesize the conducted research and its results while occasionally referencing other publications too. Mozambique has great wealth in its soil, subsoil, coast and waters. But it is also a country that both before as well as after its independence has been cursed by lengthy violent conflicts, often related to unequal distribution of the wealth inherited from a colonial era. The absence of lasting peace is undoubtedly one of the reasons why Mozambique is still one of the most underdeveloped countries in the world, despite the enormous development potential of its natural resources. If it is to avoid further devastating conflicts, the inclusive management of natural resources and more equal share of benefits are essential targets. The conducted research, as a part of the TIPS project, aims to contribute to socially inclusive natural resource management and conflict prevention in Mozambique through qualitative research-based fieldwork in 5 provinces: Niassa, Cabo Delgado, Tete, Sofala, and Inhambane. General information on natural resources and their conflicts in those provinces was gathered from public sources such as the media, government, and NGOs. And this literature review was one of the methods initially used to define the focus districts. The most in-depth information, however, was gathered from local knowledge through discussions with residents of the various localities and with the government officials working on the ground. The research aims to learn from this local knowledge while at the same time not ignoring the broader geographical and historical contexts at the national, regional, and global levels. Through those methods, the research presents a baseline analysis of natural resources, the conflicts linked to them, and seek to local proposals to improve the management of natural resources. Slide, please. Next slide, please. The core material is based on interviews and group discussions with some 260 interviews in those 27 districts, as well as informal discussions with much more people. The provinces were selected because they have significant natural resource extraction activities and host major projects in the mining, oil, and natural gas sectors. Although the impacts of mega projects that receive public attention even overseas, such as coal mining in Tete, natural gas and colored gemstones in Cabo Delgado, or environmental conservation in the famous Gorongosa National Park in Sofala, are important. The research also considers the everyday use of natural resources on a smaller scale, including land, subsoil, forest resources, and marine resources, which are used for subsistence, such as in artisanal mining or fishing, which can have an equally strong impact on the lives of local communities, in good and bad. The dynamics in 5 provinces, each with different thematic focus, where compared and successes and failures in one province are represented as potential lessons to improve natural resources management also in others. Through this fieldwork, we identified local perceptions of conflicts that often also include proposals and solutions. In the context of natural resource management, the main objectives of the research are as follows. To identify local conflicts and actors of peace, to understand local perceptions of conflict dynamics and possible solutions, to assess the needs, strong points, and limitations of the communities, and finally, to assess the dynamics and dimensions of gender and generation in those conflicts. Through mapping natural resource occurrence and related conflicts, as well as local initiatives in their districts, the aim was to contribute to conflict prevention and building inclusive and peaceful natural resources management. Analyzing the characteristics and interrelatedness of the different groups involved, strong points and limitations of communities were evaluated, as well as the dynamics and dimensions of gender and age. The dynamics in 5 provinces, each with the different thematic focus, were compared, and successes and failures in one province are represented as potential lessons to improve natural resources management also in others. Identified local perceptions of conflicts often also included proposals and solutions, which are presented in those publications, especially in training guide. Slide, please. The main themes that resulted from our research are listed here. Those themes are summarized in tables and subchapters of the research report that focus on the individual provinces and are analyzed in more detail in IESE's policy briefs. First, economic models of mining. With the focus on the local development potential of artisanal gold mining and the impact of the large areas occupied by and restricted to industrial mining. 2. Restricted areas. The impact on local communities of areas with weak state and civil society control. This theme covers the occupation of large areas for both prospecting, research, and mining, as well as environmental conservation. In those areas occupied by multinational companies, or more often by national elites in partnership with multinationals, normal legislation is not implemented either de jure or de facto. Control over the areas is largely assigned to private companies with private armed companies. 3. Use and transfer of 20 and 2.75%. Those are the shares of revenue from the extraction of forest and mineral resources, respectively, that under the mining, land and environment legislature belong to the communities living in areas of natural resource occurrence. 4. Resettlement experiences. Industrial mining or environmental conservation projects often require the resettlement of residents in the area containing those natural resources, ranging from forced to more consensual resettlement, where residents receive adequate compensation for the homes and land they lose as required by the mining law, for example. 5, and the last one, denial of access to natural resources based on party membership. There are indications of partisan exclusion not only in the allocation of land for mega projects, but also in the small and medium scale use of nature resources. Slide, please. Time allows only one example of those main themes, which is a physical and psychological fencing of large areas, land areas in Montepuez district in Cabo Delgado, which formerly were in local subsistence use in its majority. Given the restrictions on physical access combined with the conflicting interests of political elites, mining areas such as those of Montepuez, ruby mining, and Nairoto resources, both belonging to Gemfields Limited with its local partners, are rarely supervised by local state agents, district governments, or members of the provincial assemblies. For example, until at least mid-2021, the Montepuez district government was unable to gain access to Nairoto resources facilities, which possesses circa 2,000 km² area. Despite of Gemfields Limited and its local shareholders only have license for mining, in practice they are able to ban most of other economic activities in large areas with anti-motim police forces headquartered in the restricted areas. The lack of access to practice, for instance, forestry or agriculture in the area could be related to the fact that although Mozambique has a decentralized government structure that should provide for more local political autonomy, local bodies are not represented in the central decision-making process. Thus, in this scenario, decisions taken at the central level are rarely contradicted successfully at the local level, regardless of whether just or not. Access to Montepuez ruby mining and Nairoto resources is also restricted and complicated for civil society organizations and research institutions, highlighting issues of transparency and accountability. Gold and ruby mining in Montepuez also highlight two other main themes, namely with the Gemfields conflict with local and international artisanal miners, which has also fed the current jihadi war in northern Mozambique, while simultaneously making impossible or difficult for the government to block jihadists' logistical routes. The fact that local shareholders and part of leadership of this multinational company is linked to important families of national heroes makes this also an example of partisan exclusion in the use of large land areas and share of benefits. Slide, please. The aim of this report was to answer previously mentioned research questions related to nature resource conflicts. And as a conclusion, I will now resume those responses in following reflections. This research identified the main current and potential conflicts in 27 districts, summarized in maps and tables and publications. The conflicts typically occur between multinational extractive companies and communities where the government at the local, provincial, and central levels is also a stakeholder. Although the government's role is complex, the central government tends to defend the interests of their multinationals and their local shareholders, which in their majority come from national elite, which took its shape during the independence war and is often consisted on former high-ranking combatants or their descendants. Implicit conflict often occurs between the central government, which controls the licensing for exploring mineral resources, and district governments, which have to manage the consequences. There are also inner conflicts among communities, which, however, tend to leave no record for the outside world. Less inclusive and peaceful practices such as corruption, authoritarian natural resources management, including violent means and illegal or unethical use of community funds and natural resources were identified and can be revisited in the research report and other publications of this project. In one way or another, these conflicts are all linked to the multiple significance of land, rivers, lakes, and the sea as spaces containing natural wealth, but also with no less important significance of them through the housing, way of life, and history experienced by communities. In this research, more attention was paid to natural resources and the respective conflicts than peace builders, because solutions to problems arise from analyzing problems head-on. But also, some civil society organizations and peace actors, which can both contribute to this project and benefit from it, were involved as a part of the research. By peace actors, this research refers to each citizen or collective actor who participates or wants to participate in the management of natural resources, as doing so not just for their own benefit, but also for the common good. The research team met and identified hardworking and dedicated civil servants, community members, community and civil society officers, private business workers, and entrepreneurs, and community leaders acting in good faith. Actors who benefit from peace, who promote and idealize peaceful, legal, and legitimate solutions through a sense of responsibility or necessity. District governments and their officials who help their inhabitants to legalize their associations and cooperatives linked to the use and management of natural resources. Community organizations working to improve their members' personal lives and also to contribute to the greater common good. The team identified government officials who have recognized the problems and want to improve practices, NGO actors who greatly help to conduct successfully our research and can also further contribute the objectives of this project to promote peace and social inclusion in later phases of the TIPS project. Slide, please. By mapping and analyzing conflicts, especially in the police briefs and the subchapter focusing on each province in the research report. The research has attempted to identify local perceptions of conflicts that often also include the proposals and solutions presented in the training guide in relation to the 12 districts selected for the broader project. Some of the most common recommendations include the following two. A major decentralization of licensing the economic activities to local level where the consequences are felt. Two, putting the people who hold power in mining companies instead of mere consultants into direct dialogue with affected communities. Examples about less common but useful recommendations are an initiative for technical training for local young people already in the phase of licensing mining prospections to avoid situations where after years of established mining, local youths are not recruited for lack of skills, such as in northeastern Inhambane. A peace group in Gorongosa is another example. Founded during the demobilization after the 2013-2016 hostilities in central Mozambique, consists of women, demobilized combatants, and religious leaders. Its organization might serve as an example for other conflict-affected areas. However, a glance at Mozambique mining register is sufficient to understand that local perceptions can only be fully understood and make sense by taking into account the broader context, not just insights from the affected local communities. By this, we do not imply that communities affected by coal mining in Tete, for example, are not aware of the global dynamics that affect their lives. On the contrary, through their experience, they can have unique and more profound perceptions of global extractive capitalism than we as urban actors do. Examples of Marara and Moatis in Tete province addressed in their publications, in addition to being aware of the local concepts of justice that the state also recognizes in its legislation, communities affected by multinational businesses may also be well aware of their legal and formal rights and the human rights commitments of the Mozambican state signed in its international agreements and its constitution. In addition to the unique experience of witnessing at first hand the impacts of multinationals and globalization, another source of knowledge for those communities and space for mutual learning are the meetings and constant interactions with various urban-based civil society organizations, for example, during capacity building training sessions. Thus, local perceptions are an important resource for communities, as well as an essential source for scientific knowledge, but they should always be complemented and empowered by perceptions at the broader contexts. Slide, please. Assessing, it is clear that knowledge about the normative frameworks and the social contexts where communities live, or rather their organic intellectuality, varies enormously. There are committees for managing natural forest resources that were in fact established from the top down, and their members do not fully understand their powers and duties. Members of those committees were met who knew very little about the purpose of the 20% they were managing. Other committees arise more as a local initiative, possibly aided by urban NGOs, and tend to be more aware of their role and rights. In this respect, the mineral resources committees in Tete stand out, although perhaps because of their conflicts of interest with multinationals, and consequently with the national elites, they have faced more difficulties and delays in their legalization in comparison to forest resources committees, especially in other provinces. Wherever there are land conflicts and natural resources conflicts, as in the area around Gorongosa National Park, the committees and the communities they aim to represent can collide when the committees lose their legitimacy in the eyes of communities. In this particular case, some communities feel that the committees represent the park and not the community itself. Community leaders can also lose legitimacy when communities interpret certain collaboration situations with the state and private companies as their leaders being bribed. The boundary between the common good and bribery may seem tenuous when mining companies pay a subsidy to community leaders who help recruit the local workforce and thus distribute the few local opportunities. In localities where communities feel that leaders listen to and defend them, there is clearly a stronger possibility of successfully negotiating with the government and mining companies. However, in cases where there are major asymmetries in symbolic, academic, and social capital, and communities do not have any legal support, even united people can be overcome and discouraged. Districts where local governments are helping their communities to develop their lives could generate local and national development if they had central government support. Unfortunately, in situations with strong economic interests, district governments feel pressured by the central government and businesses to crack down on their own communities to the detriment of the district government. Yet, resolving those conflicts can benefit everyone, including state revenue and socio-economic development of the district. It could also promote decentralization of power, a stated commitment of the Mozambican state since the early 1990s, despite simultaneous fears among governing party that this will happen. Slide, please. As described in the subchapter on gender issues, women are the main collectors and users of natural resources in rural communities, especially those resources close to the localities where they live. When large investments occur, they are often the main losers because access to subsistence resources become more difficult and the inhabitants become more dependent on vehicles and cash incomes. Women's participation in local natural resources management mechanisms can have an empowering impact, and therefore gender balance is promoted by the government and national and international NGOs, encouraging communities to create committees with a stronger representation of women. Women's participation in hereditary authority in its part depends a great deal on the region, but it is generally more common in the north of the country where matrilineal systems predominate. In the context of this research, the provinces of Niassa, Cabo Delgado, and the north of Tete. Government officials and especially NGOs consider that queens have a very important role, and some believe that they, as well as women committee members in general, tend to be less corrupt than their male colleagues and therefore highly respected in local communities. On the whole, young people, especially young women, have less decision-making power in current situation, in contrary to early years after independence. Although they are the main workforce in resource extraction. Investments sometimes create opportunities for young people in terms of training, temporary employment, informal businesses, and for a minority of young locals, wage work. Young people are also the main actors in activities that are mainly organized locally. Fisher works, artisanal miners, farmers, beekeepers, etc. In situations of socio-economic exclusion resulting, for example, from the occupation of large tracts of land for mining, young people suffer financially. whereas the elderly regret more the symbolic and cultural losses, such as sacred areas and graves. As described in the subchapter of Niassa, under Matri locality conditions, this dynamic can also exist between genders, because woman's power is based on land and local Matri lineages, whereas men usually come from outside the community and don't feel land rights in similar way. Because of their exclusion, young people are easily angered, and as a result, are the main participants in the most serious and violent conflicts, such as revolts, uprising, insurgencies, and wars, as currently in northern Mozambique. Important questions about the involvement of a number of minorities, such as people with disabilities and LGBTQ people, were not addressed in the research material. Addressing those groups' special needs in natural resources management would require further effort and longer involvement with the communities and research participants. Slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yanni, for presentation and for sharing with us the findings of the research. In case there are any questions or any comments, I would encourage participants to add them in the chat. And also maybe I would like to invite the other researcher from the project and also the director of our partner on the project from IESC, Sergio, to complement what has been shared by Yanni. Sergio, would you like to go next?
Yes, sir. Just 2 points, but Jan has already shared almost everything we found on the ground. Just 2 aspects that I think we can mention. The one is the role of the local political elites in natural resource exploration. So we have found in several parts of the countries that there is a negative perception of the action of some political figures linked to the ruling party. By ruling party, I mean Frelimo. So these figures or political elite are seen as having taken over a vast portion of land, but paradoxically, little has been explored. Also, the political elite is seen as colluding in illegal logging in collaboration with foreign citizens. By foreign citizen, people are referring to Chinese in most of the time. So another aspect is related to the weak capacity of state to control its own territory, opening space for the illegal exploration of natural resources. So those areas are object of illegal exploitation of natural resources, mainly by foreign citizens, particularly by Tanzanians or citizens from the Great Lakes. In those areas, the state doesn't exercise and control, and in general, these are areas of difficult access. Most of these areas are in Niassa and Cabo Delgado. So that's the 2 things I think I can add in what Jan said, and I've been waiting for, we'll wait for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergio, for your questions, for your responses and your additions to the comprehensive presentation by Yanni. So we have received 2 questions, and I've posted one already in the chat, and then I'm just typing out also the next question. And if anybody else would like to add their questions, please feel free to do that in the chat or even raise your hand and ask the question directly. So the first question is, what is the role of religious actors as well as the traditional women leaders or the queens in addressing the conflict? So I think, Yane, you already spoke about a bit about the gender dimensions and the role of the queens, but maybe if you could just share also a little bit more about what is their role in the community traditionally, and what did you also, what were your findings in terms of their role or changing dynamics, as well as the role of religious actors? Thank you.
Yes. So there is basically two parts in this question. I would first address this question about the religious actors, and like afterwards, role of women. So I think their role is very important, but like when conflict is on, often the intervention is not necessarily welcomed. But there is in Cabo Delgado, as well as in central Mozambique, where those most severe armed conflicts have been in last 10 years. There has been a lot of both Christian and Islamic immediation and kind of interfaith dialogue, which certainly has contributed on efforts to build sustainable peace. And like in general, I'm not a specialist in Cabo Delgado. Maybe Sergio can comment it much better. But in general, it seems that in northern Mozambique, relationship between Muslims and Christians have not suffered, even if the conflict is very much caused by jihadist insurgents. But basically, like vast majority of local Muslims, they don't feel related to jihadists' agenda. And what about women's role? So basically, in Gorongosa peace group, it's we don't have so good knowledge about the mechanism. Maybe even our partners who have been working with the group know know something about this issue. But it's a group that one component are women, and they are like female leaders and members of local churches, as well as traditional, how to say, like local authorities, as what is called, what are called rainhas, queens in Portuguese. And in general, this authority of local indigenous authorities is not usually restrictive. So it functions through respect that local people are kind of processing to them. And in that sense, many queens have a lot of authority because they are they are respected, but they might have like a disadvantage in comparison to male indigenous authorities, in Portuguese called regulus, because regulus can be polygamous, and that might help them to accumulate work and in that sense also wealth, which can function as political power in local level. So I think maybe Sergio can have some insights about Cabo Delgado or other aspect of this question.
Yeah, the only thing that I can add is that in general, those leaders are well respected, and they play a very important role. Usually, before a project starts, they are invited to participate in the discussions. They play a role of intermediates between companies, states, and community, and they are asked to explain most of the time, to explain to the communities the advantages of the objectives of the project. So the local leaders or traditional leaders, religious leaders, or the queen in some parts really have an important role.
Thank you so much, Sergio and Yanni, for that response. So we have two more questions. Maybe one is related to the insurgency in Cabo Delgado. So the question is, how has the insurgency impacted or influenced the conflict dynamics in the target area? So I guess maybe sort of like the pre-existing conflict dynamics, if it is possible to share that. Sergio, would you like to speak to that?
Come again with the question.
So the question is, how has the insurgency in Cabo Delgado impacted or influenced the conflict dynamics in the target areas?
This is a very difficult question. Target areas of research, of our research.
Yes, I guess if you did notice, any findings from the districts that you visited in terms of the impact of the insurgency, if you could highlight those. But if that wasn't also coming up during the research, I guess that's also fine.
Yeah, first of all, it was difficult to do research in Cabo Delgado because of to travel in some areas of Cabo Delgado because of the military situation. It's very complicated. So we choose to go to some areas which are considered as safe. We went to Montepuez, as probably most of you probably know. It's one of the richest regions in Cabo Delgado with high quality rubies. So here we discussed with some people, and our assistants were from Montepuez also. So we did some interviews there. What we couldn't do research in the area of rubies because it's a very complicated area. We went to Nairoto, which is one of localities of Montepuez, where also we have the exploration of gold, which is exploited by some people linked to the political elite. And here also we observed some dynamics like the exclusion of local youth in the resource exploration, and also the exploration of natural resources by foreigners, but we didn't notice the impact of the insurgency in the exploration of natural resources in our research. What has been happening in Cabo Delgado is that in some areas, because of security issues, some companies are not exploring they closed or they didn't start to explore their mines, or they didn't open their factories because of this situation. That's the main thing that I can say about that. In Montepuez, in the area of rubies, this exploration continues. So even if before October 27, so the day the EOS started the conflict. So before that date, there were some conflicts between local forces and local communities, but this stopped, and now the exploration of natural resources controlled by the rock mining companies. So we didn't notice another kind of impact of the insurgency in the natural resources exploration.
Great. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Yanni, go ahead.
Yeah, I would kind of turn upside down this question in the sense that natural resource conflicts and this insurgency are they are absolutely interrelated, like everything in Cabo Delgado, in the sense that there is government itself believes that rates what Mozambican government and private security companies made to Montepuez ruby areas significantly helped the insurgents to recruit new people, and I think there should be some truth in that, and also like in the sense I personally see that this armed conflict is a result of social economic exclusion of especially young people in Cabo Delgado. It's of course there is other reasons too, other causes, but it's impossible to see that it's impossible to not see this aspect of exclusion as one of the root causes for the insurgency. Also, there is at the same time that there is severe war going on in Cabo Delgado. What happens in desktops in the capital of Mozambique is that those how it's called, like land mine concessions are not stopped, but there is more and more land concessions, and maybe even more difficult to contest local people because there is difficulties physically go to certain areas, and like situation of freedom of expression is complicated. So basically, the scramble for Africa is simultaneously in full intensity in Cabo Delgado than like half of the provinces under the war. So, but they are of course kind of abstract relations which are not necessarily always like kind of extremely concrete, but yeah, I see the exclusion as very much. One indication what came up in this research was that every year there has been more young men candidating to local universities than women, and like last years it has changed, and it seems that this is because of like so absurd that it can sound. There is different alternatives for Cabo Delgado's youth, like young men in this case. Should I go to study in university, or should I attend like participate to jihadist insurgency? So like it's very probable that those statistics are also a result of the conflict, and the conflict is also influencing those statistics.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Sergio, also. One last question before we go into closing, unless, of course, there are any more and people want to also comment or ask any question directly. So the question says that, do we see any impact of climate change on the conflict dynamics?
This, I think, can be, Sofala, for example, can be used as an example of this climate change impact on natural resource conflicts, because what we have found from our research is that increasingly more and more, because of the climate change issues, the conflict between communities and animals is increasing. So there is fight between communities and animals for water and other natural resources. So there's increasingly more and more conflicts between wild animals and local communities. So I think this is one aspect that come from our research that we found from the ground, and it's noticeable not only in Sofala but in other areas of Cabo Delgado, which is one of the provinces that is also suffering from is heavily suffering from climate change issues.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add something more.
Like maybe just complementing a bit that like in this Sofala case, Idai and some smaller tropical cyclones in recent years, they caused a lot of destruction, and consequently several hunting farms which are surrounding Gorongosa National Park were left unattended, which also kind of augmented to human-animal conflict. And there is also in some places those climate change related natural catastrophes have, as in Busi district, have caused that people have to leave their communities and move to other communities area, which have caused kind of land conflict between the communities. Maybe not in this particular case, we didn't observe it as how to say, like concrete conflict, but latent conflict. But resentments were present, and it can kind of cause pressure on land use in local levels.
Thank you, Anyane. So we have received one more question. I think that's more related to the project. So Lacerda, feel free to answer that. So the question is that, are there any measures that have been put in place by the project to ensure the locals benefit from the natural resources through employment and value addition? Lacerda, do you want to come in?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, in terms of the measure which really the project is putting so that the local beneficiary can benefit from natural resource through the employment, the value of change that. The project as such, we conducted the trainings, and after training, for instance, we're having what we created a group which are dealing with local government, also local corporate company about their to get in the market. But this really is still a bit a challenge issue, because as you know, that there's many employment issue for those areas are coming from. There are many claims for the youth in the area which the project is being implemented. People are being affected to those workers in the employment that are coming from the suburb of Maputo. But so what first we are doing is that last week we had also a meeting. The people who attended the meeting in Seoul district, where for instance we have the Sazol company working there, and that we call the camp where for instance was discussed, and the position about for instance how should Sazol look in terms of opening a space for youth to be to have that access of employment in those areas. So that is one of them. And another issue which was happening is that another kind of benefits, like for coming from the 20% of natural resources exploitation, the benefit from 2.75%. So in that, the project what it's doing is it's connecting the beneficiaries which we are trying within the local government structure, which they are participatory structure, where for instance is also to influence the local government to address the issue of accessing a natural resource benefits in the benefit which in terms of the participating in the planning process. But honestly saying is still like not 100% achieved, because this is the process which you need to take long. First of all, sometimes the employment process is more centralized within the corporate, and there's some qualification is expected, but which you cannot find those from the area which you're implementing the project. So that's what I can share for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lacerda. And I think that we have no further questions. So maybe on behalf of our director at the network, our programs and operations director, Matthias, who was unable to join us today as he had some connectivity issues in Finland, strangely enough, but because of a snowstorm. So he sent his apologies that he wasn't able to join and also close the session. So on behalf of him, I would like to thank everybody for joining today's session, and also to share that the recording will be shared with those that have registered, as well as also widely through our different channels. My colleague Sarah has included the link to the research documents in the chat, so all the publications, you can access them there, and we will also upload the recording of the session as well to the page, so you can view them there. And I just want to say thank you especially also to our researchers, to Yanni and Sergio, for sharing about the findings. It was a really long, it was quite an intensive and long period of research that had also challenges due to access to some of the target districts. Also, it was still during the COVID period that the research was conducted. And then we have also now had the dissemination events in person in Mozambique, in Maputo, and also in the provincial capitals, and organized also validation workshops with different stakeholders. So this was in addition to the activities that we had planned under the research, we thought it would be also a great opportunity to share the findings online with a wider audience, especially those who are outside of Mozambique and who are still interested in understanding the situation, and that how this could also have a regional impact, or how it could be applicable also in other country contexts or regional contexts. So we will continue to the share updates about the TIPS project, which is ongoing until the end of 2023. So we still have activities planned for the following year. And we will be sure to share those updates as well with you, taking into consideration the findings from this research, and actually now seeing how can we use these findings and the recommendations from the report to actually design our project activities that we have planned, and strengthen also the design of the project and beyond. So thank you to everybody once again. Thank you for joining us, and wish you a good day and week ahead.